We are going to the story at the beginning. I am reading this in the words of the person who sent the story. When I was 7 years old, my grandmother told me this story. I'm not sure if all of it was true, as she said it was something a coworker of hers experienced while serving in the army. My grandmother's friend, who we'll call Lisa, wanted to take a smoke break late one night, but didn't want to go alone. So she asked my grandmother to come along. At first, my grandmother refused since they weren't allowed to leave the camp. But eventually, she agreed. As they walked away from the camp, they could hear the sound of grasshoppers and the wind rustling the trees. The only light came from a few distant lamps and the moon in the night sky. They walked a fair distance from the campsite and just stood there for a while, feeling the chilly breeze. Lisa pulled out a cigarette and lit it with one of those small lighters that require you to flick the top with your thumb. After she finished smoking, they stayed a bit longer, chatting late into the night. Suddenly, they heard footsteps approaching them. A few moments later, they saw a man walking towards them. They recognized him. He was a sniper. As he got closer, he said, "You guys shouldn't be here." He paused for a second before continuing, not letting them say a word. "It's dangerous out here. If you want my advice, don't ever come out again." Lisa nervously responded, "Why? We need to sneak back in." But he didn't answer her question. Instead, he offered, "I'll walk you back, at least past the hill." My grandmother and Lisa, both a little scared since he was a higher rank and they didn't want to get in trouble, quickly agreed. "Yeah, okay," they said in unison. As they started walking back, the man seemed to relax a little. "I'm not going to snitch," he said, "but I'm going to tell you both something." He then began to recount a strange experience he had the previous week while guarding his post near the warehouse. "I was on guard duty near the warehouse. I noticed a foul, rotten odor in the air, and out of curiosity, I decided to investigate. I saw several large black containers nearby, and after looking around to make sure no one was watching, I opened one of them. I immediately regretted it. Inside, I saw 6 bodies. I slammed the container shut. But just then, I saw my superior officer walking toward me. "Why are you acting nervous? What are you sneaking around for?" he barked at me. I quickly responded, "No, sir." He glared at me, but eventually let me go. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. So later that night, I snuck back into the warehouse. As I approached, I saw through my binoculars that the gate was open. The smell of decay hit me again, and as I got closer, that's when I saw it. A human-like figure emerging from the dark warehouse. It was incredibly tall, naked, but without any visible private parts, and its skin was a strange grayish yellow color. The most disturbing thing was that it had what looked like a large, round opening like a rectum on its stomach. It stood on 2 feet and had 2 hands, but its feet only had 3 toes. Panicking, I shot it 3 times, but the bullets didn't affect it. It kept coming at me, even faster now. That's when I remembered something my grandmother once told me. When you're in trouble, call upon the blood of Jesus. So I started shouting, "The blood of Jesus, the blood of Jesus, the blood of Jesus." And almost immediately, the creature exploded into a gray mist. I didn't stay to see what happened next. I ran as fast as I could. As the man finished his story, he warned my grandmother and her friend not to tell anyone about him. By then, they had made it back to the campsite. He dropped them off and returned to his room, leaving the 2 of them alone. My grandmother and Lisa didn't sleep at all that night. Time passed, and they asked around about the man, but they were told he had been transferred to a different camp. Quite easy. I have had many paranormal experiences since I was a child. Things have followed me, even back home. I used to think all the places I lived were haunted, but now I believe I'm the one who's haunted. When I was little, my great-grandma would tell me not to be scared of the visitors because they were just passing through. As I got older, I realized she meant ghosts or spirits. When the pandemic hit, I decided to switch careers and began working in the death field. I often enter people's homes and observe how they lived. Many times, I felt like someone was right behind me, breathing down my neck or standing beside me. On one occasion, I went with a coworker to a home to start the process of moving the deceased to the morgue. As I walked toward a part of the house with 2 doors leading into bedrooms, I noticed one of the doors were cracked open, revealing furniture covered in sheets. Suddenly, I heard someone yell, "Stop!" Startled, I looked behind me, but my coworker was still talking to the others in the house and hadn't heard anything. I turned back to the door, and as I touched the doorknob, I heard the same stern voice say, "Stop!" At that point, I backed off and waited for the others to help me with the removal. When we got into the work vehicle, I told my coworker what I heard, but she said she hadn't heard anything. From that moment on, whenever I felt a heavy presence or energy, I would speak out loud, explaining what I was doing. I felt like maybe the spirits thought I was invading their space, even though they were no longer alive. However, what was happening in my home was much worse. I had been in training when we attended a death scene. The person had taken their own life after doing something terrible. We handled the removal, and the body was taken to the morgue. A few days later, my youngest child asked me, "Mom, have you been coming home and leaving right away?" I said no. She told me she kept hearing someone moving in and out of the rooms. A couple of days after that, my oldest said, "Mom, we keep hearing someone call us, but we know it's not you or Dad." I asked if they had seen anything, and my oldest described seeing a person dressed in a shirt and pants. She described it more in detail, but for identifying purposes, I won't describe it. My oldest told me they've been seeing the figure for a couple of weeks, and even our dog had been barking at it. At this point, I'm on full alert because her description is like the person I picked up. It's safe to say my husband doesn't see anything or feel anything, so he doesn't take notice. My oldest can see and hear things. My youngest only hears them. So when they tell me something's wrong, I listen and take action to protect them. I told my kids that if they saw the spirit again, they should tell it to leave and that it wasn't welcome. As I said, I took action. I demanded that the spirits leave and told it that it wasn't welcome. I asked for the protection from my deceased relatives and from God to guard my home, my children, my animals, and my husband. After about a week, the house felt lighter, but I started being more vocal at work, saying things like, "Don't follow me home. You can go anywhere else, but not with me." Since then, I haven't had as many spirits follow me, but I know they're still around while I'm working. When I started this job, I was well aware this could be a possibility of things following me, of me entering places I shouldn't, and picking people up I would have never encountered in my everyday life. I even had a friend over once during a psychic reading call. She came over unexpectedly while I was still on the phone with the psychic. When she entered my house, the psychic said, "Whoever is behind you has a lot of dead people around her. She needs to protect herself. It couldn't be draining." I was surprised the psychic could know or sense that without being there. Like I said, I'm a haunted person. It's never been the location. It's just part of who I am.